When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett agreed to debate Candace Owens on live national television, she thought it was a chance to finally talk about real policy. What she walked into was an ambush. The audience was stacked, the questions were loaded, and the insults were designed to break her. Candace came armed with edited clips, twisted facts, and a stage built for humiliation. But just when it seemed like Jasmine would be silenced, she turned the attack into a masterclass, flipping the entire narrative and forcing the country to confront the ugly truth it had just been cheering. This is a story of how one woman's stillness became louder than a stadium of noise. The event was called Black Truths versus Political Lies. The poster alone was a warning shot, a picture of Jasmine, drained of color, under the caption, "The party's favorite token." It was a racist smear disguised as a headline. But Jasmine, a former public defender who'd spent her life in the trenches of the justice system, wasn't one to back down. She walked onto that stage to talk facts. The studio was a coliseum. The lights, the cameras, the crowd, it was all pure theater. Candace Owens walked out first to a rock star's welcome. Thunderous applause, flashing lights, a standing ovation. She owned the room before a single word was spoken. Moments later, Jasmine entered. The cheering vanished. The warm lights turned to a single, harsh, cold spotlight that pinned her to the stage. There was no welcome, no applause, just a suffocating silence and the invasive zoom of a dozen cameras, all waiting for her to crack. This wasn't a debate stage. It was an island of isolation. And just as that silence became unbearable, the studio lights dimmed. Before the moderator could even finish her opening remarks, Candace stepped forward, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to an execution. "Before we begin," she announced, her voice slicing through quiet, "I think the American people deserve to know who they're really listening to." With a nod to someone off camera, the giant screen behind them exploded to life. It was a slickly edited video, all grainy footage and chilling piano music. There was a younger Jasmine, wearing her public defender badge, speaking to a judge. The video cut to a mugshot of a black man she was defending, then to blaring headlines. "Crockett chooses criminal over victim." Soft on crime. Her actual arguments in court, the context, the nuance, the fight for a fair trial, were all gone, replaced by a soundbite that made her seem callous. The final frame froze on her face, with bold red letters slamming onto the screen. Justice. Or just politics. A wave of gasps, then murmurs, then mockery rolled through the audience. The lights snapped back on, but the chill remained. Candace turned to Jasmine, her eyes gleaming. "You don't represent justice," she said, her words landing like stones. "You represent the problem." The audience stirred. A few laughs broke out, then more. Someone yelled, "She protects thugs." Another shouted, "Say it louder." The laughter swelled, not from wit, but from pure, unadulterated cruelty. Jasmine Crockett hadn't spoken a single word. Her microphone wasn't even on. She stood beneath the glare of 1,000 eyes, already sentenced before the trial had even begun. Her jaw was locked, not in anger, but in a kind of superhuman restraint. This wasn't a debate. It was a public execution. And the ambush had only just begun. Candace wasn't finished. She leaned into microphone, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're not a black leader," she declared. "You are a product, manufactured by a system that uses black faces to keep black communities in chains." The attack wasn't just political, it was personal. It was designed to strip Jasmine of her identity, her credibility, her very humanity. Candace's voice grew colder, crueler. "You're not a fighter, Jasmine. You're a performer. A Soros-sponsored actress cast to sell old lies and new body." The dog whistle was clear. A few cheers erupted. "Preach," someone yelled. Then, Candace delivered the line she had clearly saved for the kill shot. A line so vile, so historically loaded, it sucked the air out of the room. "You," she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Jasmine, "are the overseer on the new plantation." The words echoed loud and violent. In the front row, a young black woman, no older than 20, bowed her head as tears streamed down her face. She wasn't just watching a debate. She was witnessing the weaponization of her own history, used by one black woman to tear down another, and Jasmine saw her, through the glare of the lights, through the sting in her own chest. She saw that girl's pain, but she didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, her posture unbroken, her expression unreadable. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a strategy. It was a quiet rebellion against their expectations. Every second she refused a break. Her stillness grew louder than Candace's voice. And Candace could feel it. The control she held so tightly was slipping. So she went for another attack. "Since we're talking about performance," Candace said with a smirk, "let's take a look at one of Jasmine's greatest hits." The screen lit up again. This time, it was footage from a congressional hearing. It showed Jasmine, her voice thick with emotion, recounting the story of a young man wrongfully convicted. A single, genuine tear rolled down her cheek as she spoke. But here, the clip was distorted, slowed down, zoomed in, with dramatic music laid over it. It wasn't grief anymore. It was theater. It was mockery. Candace turned to the audience. "You see that?" she said dismissively. "That's not leadership. That's emotional manipulation. I don't need to cry to fight. I need facts." She stabbed a finger toward the screen. "That is what the left does when they have no answers. They cry." The audience erupted. It was a roar of approval, a standing ovation for cruelty. The cameras panned across the cheering faces, capturing every triumphant smirk. This was victory television. And Jasmine, she just stood there. She let them laugh at her tears. Tears born from years of fighting for broken families in a broken system. She refused to defend the pain. They were turning into a punchline, because the goal wasn't just to win an argument. It was to break her publicly, to turn her compassion into a liability. And Jasmine Crockett refused to play their game. The cheers were still fading when the moderator, clearly rattled, tried to regain control. "Thank you, Miss Owens. Let's move on." But she never finished, because from the other side of the stage, Jasmine Crockett raised her hand, not to ask for permission, but to command a moment. The room went silent. She took one step out from behind her podium, then another. The click of her heels was a countdown clock. She walked to the very center of the stage, into the space Candace had just dominated, and the spotlight followed her. She wasn't a target anymore. She was a presence. She let the silence hang for a moment, a silence she now owned. Then she spoke. Her voice was low, measured, and filled with iron. "I've been silent long enough," she said. "Now it's time for the truth." That one sentence changed everything. The taunts, the smirks, the laughter, it all vanished, replaced by a raw, unfiltered tension. Candace, still clutching her oversized prop check from an earlier stunt, froze. For the first time all night, her face wasn't confident. It was calculating. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She held a thin black folder, and with steady hands, she opened it. "Let's talk about numbers," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd that just cheered her humiliation. "Because you've thrown a lot of statistics around tonight, and I think it's time we clean them up." Her takedown was surgical. "You said poverty rates in Democrat-led cities are stagnant." "False." Her voice was clinical. "You used data from Chicago from 12 years ago. You conveniently skipped the 2021 report showing black homeownership in South Chicago is up 13%. She turned a page. "You framed Baltimore as a city of decay, but you omitted a crucial detail. Your party's Republican governor vetoed nearly $3 billion in urban redevelopment funds. That money was blocked by the very party you defend." The applause was gone. The room was still as glass. "You used data from Detroit from the peak of the Great Recession to call a failure. You didn't mention that since 2015, Detroit has seen its first population growth in 6 decades, with unemployment for black residents dropping nearly 8%. Candace shifted, ready to interrupt, but the moderator, finally finding her spine, held up a hand. "Miss Owens, please. You'll have your chance." Jasmine never even looked her way. She was just getting started. One by one, she dismantled every lie, every twisted statistic with cold, hard facts. She exposed the misleading numbers on education funding, on healthcare, on crime. She didn't offer opinions. She delivered evidence. When she finished, she lowered the papers. So when you stand here and say you care about Black lives, but ignore the policies that actually shape them, you're not speaking truth. You're selling a narrative. I came here to talk policy. You came to perform. The room was breathless. The stage was no longer a stage. It was a courtroom, and Jasmine Crockett was delivering the closing argument. But she wasn't done. She reached for a tablet on her podium. With a single tap, the screen behind her lit up again. This time, it was a split screen of Candace Owens from two different eras. On the left, a 2015 Candace. Her voice nervous but firm. Donald Trump is a demagogue. He has no respect for women, for Black people, for truth. On the right, a 2020 Candace, beaming on Fox News. He's the most honest president we've had in decades. Black America owes him a second term. The screen went black. A few stifled laughs broke the silence. Jasmine looked directly at Candace, her voice steady. That was you before the checks cleared. You called him a monster until you realized that being his defender would get you a microphone and a book deal. You're not a leader. You're a product. And you sold yourself to the highest bidder. For a half second, nobody moved. Then a slow clap started in the back. Then another. Soon, the applause was rolling forward. Not the frenzied cheering from before, but something deeper. Respect. But the final blow was yet to come. Jasmine's face hardened with a calm, righteous fury. There's one more thing, she said, her voice dropping. Something we all need to hear again. She tapped the tablet one last time. The screen showed Candace on a podcast, her expression cold and dismissive. Her voice filled the studio. George Floyd, the recording of Candace, said, didn't die because of police brutality. He died because of a drug overdose. Because he was a criminal, not a martyr. The video ended. The screen went dark. The silence in the room was absolute. Jasmine turned to face the crowd, her eyes burning with fire that had been held in check all night. You said he died from addiction, not from the police. She looked dead into the camera, speaking to millions. You defended a murderer to get views. She paused, letting the weight of it sink in. Then she delivered a line that would echo across the country. I defend dignity to get justice. The words didn't just land. They detonated. For a heartbeat, the studio was frozen. Then, applause. Real explosive, thunderous applause. People were on their feet. The young man in the Malcolm X hoodie was crying as he clapped. This wasn't for a politician. It was for a truth that had been denied a voice for far too long. The debate was no longer about parties. It was about soul. And Jasmine Crockett had just laid hers bare. No one was looking at Candace Owens anymore. The camera found her, though her confident smirk was gone, replaced by a rigid mask. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. Then the camera zoomed in on her hand. It was trembling, a slight, then uncontrollable shake. The director in the control room whispered into his headset, "Hold that shot." It was a silent, internal collapse of a performer whose stage had been ripped out from under her. Jasmine stepped back. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She looked into the main camera, the one that had broadcast her humiliation, and offered not a victory speech, but a prayer. "I don't need to win this debate," she said, her voice softening. "I just need us to stop losing to ourselves." In the days that followed, that clip went viral. It wasn't just a political moment. It was a cultural one. Commentators called it a masterclass in moral courage. An op-ed in the Atlantic was titled, "She Met Spectacle with Restraint." Donations flooded her office. But Jasmine didn't capitalize on it. She refused interviews, flew back to her district, and went to a town hall in a high school gym. Candace Owens, meanwhile, vanished. Her social media went dark. Her podcast went silent. She had built a career on being the loudest voice in the room, but when faced with quiet, unshakable truth, her megaphone shattered. The human lesson here is not just that dignity matters. It's that it costs something. Jasmine didn't win because she clapped back harder. She won because she refused to trade her integrity for a soundbite. in a world drowning in noise. She reminded us that silence, when wielded by someone who knows who they are, can be sharper than any scream. She showed that the most dangerous thing a principled person can do to a demagogue is nothing. Just stand still. Let them rage. Let them flail. And let them reveal themselves to a world that is finally watching. She didn't win because she played the game better. She won because she showed the game for what it was, and then chose not to play at all.